everybody. Welcome back. This is Brian and Mr. Betcher here for Breaking Down Security.
Hello.
So it's another week. It's a lovely week here in Seattle. It's about 80 degrees or so, and it's really nice. And we have a very special guest here this week. We actually have an author, a published author, Miss Georgia Weidman. Did I get that right, Weidman?
Well, Weidman, Weidman, or Weidman, whichever. I kind of go with whatever people come up with.
Oh God. Okay.
What does your mother call you?
What does my mother call me?
Yeah.
She just calls me Georgia, or that person who is finally done with her book.
There you go. Hey, you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in addition to your book, I wanted to go back a little bit and ask you about how you got started in information security. I know that's a pretty generic question across all the podcasts, but many of our listeners are just beginning in information security, so they don't often have an idea of who the big players are in the industry. So I wanted to find out what your origin story was.
Well, my origin story is actually kind of funny. Well, I did math. I went to college early. I went to college when I was 14, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Not that I knew what I wanted to do with my life when I was 18 and should have been going to college either. But I had to pick a major. So my mom was a computer scientist and my dad was a physicist. So I kind of compromised and I did math. I tried to do math grad school, but it quickly became obvious that, if I was, I guess, going to do math, that I would have to be really, really good at it, or else, I'd end up like teaching at a community college or something.
Sure.
So it was like either go home and live with your parents, which is funny because now I actually do live with my parents because I'm on the road so much that having an apartment is kind of pointless. But at the time, at like age, I guess I was about 18 or 19, it was like go home and live with your parents or go to grad school in something.
Oh.
So, and I, did not at that point want to live with parents at all. So James Madison University happened to want me to come do a master's in computer science there. So even though it was way too late to like be turning in applications, they still let me in. So thank you to James Madison for that. So I did computer science. It was a master's in computer science. We did secure software engineering, which if you've read any of my code, you can tell I probably should have paid more attention. And there was also some information security. It was kind of like a minor in information security as well. But the main thing was that we had a collegiate cyber defense competition team. And I really, this is kind of sad and embarrassing, but I really just joined because the captain was really attractive and I was very into him. And I wanted to hang out with him. And he's married to the same girlfriend he had then, so you see how well that worked out for me. But in the process, I found that I very much enjoyed the collegiate cyber defense competition. Playing as a student the next year, I was actually the captain of the team, and I met the red team members, the attackers, and I was like, okay, I want to be like them. One of them, Rob Fuller, aka Mubix, actually came down, took a day off of work, came down to our school and, talked to us. And it was kind of at that point that I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, which it was good because, at some point I couldn't just stay in school forever and just keep accumulating degrees as I tried to figure it out. Though I guess, I don't know, I could have gone all the way to PhD or something. But I mean, that was really, I guess, how I got my start. Coming straight out of school, I guess I had it lucky that, recruiters just kind of showed up on our campus and were like, okay, come work for us. So, my first job out of college was I did basically on-site security for one of the government agencies. I was a contractor. I shared a cubicle with about 5 different other people. We ran Nessus once a month or something. And then it was kind of a job that one person could do, but there were about 10 of us on the team. But I spent my nights and weekends and time that I wasn't, doing work at work, learning more about it. I mean, I certainly still have a lot more to learn. I mean, every day it's like the amount of information there is just in say, mobile hacking, just to even say that I knew everything in mobile hacking would be absurd, that it's, but I just, I tried to learn as much as possible, which was, I guess, kind of would lead us into the book question of why I wrote a beginner security book. But, it was just trying to find out, as much as possible about this security thing that I wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, I guess that is a good place to start. So you wrote the book for the idea of like a how-to manual on how to be a penetration tester, or did you just see that there was a need for that out there, or were you approached by No Starch to do it, or did you propose the idea to them?
I was approached by No Starch to write a book. I'm not sure if No Starch like had anything in particular in mind, but I know when I first announced I had signed a deal to write a book, a lot of people thought I was going to do mobile hacking book, because that's where the majority of my research has been. I don't necessarily know that a book on my research would be that interesting of a book per se, but what I wanted from basically the word go was that I wanted to do an introductory book. When I was, I guess, I spent my summer between the first year of grad school and second year of grad school reading Counter Hack Reloaded, and I really liked it. But what I felt was kind of missing from it, the only thing really that was missing from it was, I would have to, and perhaps that's the hacker way, and a lot of the people who have said that my book sucks have kind of gone along the lines of that. As a hacker, you should have to take the white paper, and if you don't understand that white paper, go back to the white paper before it, all the way back to the beginning, and you have to figure it out. Figuring out how to get the tools working, and it just, at the level I was at, I barely at that point even had any Linux experience at all. That it was just, I just kept running into problems, getting things to work. At that point, there's a lot more now than there was then. Like there's Metasploitable and and some other like vulnerable, like the DICDs. But at that point, it was, I spent a lot of time just like setting things up to try and test these tools and get the tools to work. And, it's like, then there was Backtrack. Luckily, I discovered Backtrack, which, is now Kali. But I felt like I spent a lot of time that I wasn't really prepared for at the time, reading man pages, trying to get things to set up, things like that, things that I feel like at the time really frustrated me, and I feel like probably frustrated a lot of other people who were just trying to learn in those early stages, whereas now it's like just part of my everyday life is, trying to get some tool to work, including my own sometimes, as these things go. But I think, at the beginner level, I just thought it would be nice to have, like, here's this, we'll set this up, chapter 1 of my book, just we do some setup. We have Windows 7, we have Windows XP, we have a older Linux system as well, and then we have Kali. It started out as Backtrack, and then, Kali came out, so we basically threw the whole thing out and started again. And then it was Kali 1.0, and then, right before we were supposed to publish, Kali 1.0.6 came out, and so it is Kali 1.0.6, so it will, Kali 1.0.7 is already out, but at the point, at some given point in time, it was up to date. Even my tool, I've added things since then, but when it just gives a walkthrough, and there's a lot of screenshots. There's a lot of step-by-step. There's a lot of, I just tried to explain it, in very simple terms, like not expecting a lot of knowledge going in, because I feel like a lot of books that I read, even, at the point I'm at now, I'm like, I have to spend a lot of time going back and reading white papers and whatnot about, subjects there. It's just assumed that I have this knowledge, and I realize there's, again, kind of like the criticism you get is that, all of this is technically available on Google somewhere, including, my stuff. The last chapter of the book is actually about my smartphone pen test framework. So it kind of, goes through all of this. And then at the end, it's like, well, here's a tool I wrote. Maybe now you would like to write a tool of your own, kind of thing. So I showed them my tool that I wrote. And I kind of forgot where I was going with this. But where was I going with this? But just the idea that, at some point you will have to move outside of the book.
Yeah.
It is all available on Google, of course. If you Googled for any of the techniques in those book or in the chapters of the book, you would probably be able to find something to that effect. I mean, I learned it somewhere, either from some course I took at some point or from Googling it, or just, being on a client engagement and having to figure this out, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But, as an absolute beginner, you may not necessarily know where to start, even where to look. And yeah. I guess I found, when I was starting out, and even still now, it's like I'm doing a lot of stuff with exploit development, and it's a lot of times it's like, if I could just find someone who would just answer my stupid questions sometimes. We all have stupid questions. No matter, I swear, no matter how far you get, you will always have stupid questions about something. And it's like, I spend days and days and days like going through white papers and reading assembly codes. And then, when I finally figured it out, I was like, oh, somebody could have just explained that to me in like 2 minutes. And then, I would have gone on about my way and I would have understood it. So I don't know. I just really wanted to, provide that resource. I mean, I get emails probably every day of people like, how do I get started in information security? And I really wanted to have something where I could say, here's something, it's not that expensive to get, it's a book, it's not an expensive course. There's a lot of great courses out there. I've done, I do teaching myself, try and make it in general as affordable as possible and still be able to eat, kind of thing.
Sure.
But, the book perhaps undermined that, because it took my entire introduction to pen test course, and now you can get it on most days for about $20. Of course, you don't get me and my little side notes, but, well, you get some of them.
That's true.
There's certainly some side notes of, life on a pen test, how this was relevant to me about, some of the techniques that are in there. But cool. I don't know. It was quite an undertaking. It was, when I first wrote on, I guess, like Facebook and Twitter that I had taken a book deal, I got a lot of people who were like, say goodbye to your loved ones now. Life is about to be consumed. And I was like, nah, it's going to be fine. It's like, indeed, I would say that it did, in fact, consume my life for a while. I was, it definitely slowed down some of my other projects that, now I have time to do again, which is exciting. But
well, because you were under a deadline, so that there was that kind of thing going on too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So do you find that the research you're doing, do you have a hey, can I ask you a question kind of guy, or I've one of the podcasts we were going to have coming up was the value of research, because we see that at work a lot. We'll see people asking questions about things instead of attempting to Google it. Is there a point where you should just say, okay, yeah, Google can't help me, the search engines are not good, go directly to the source?
Well, I find it's a lot of things are not that well documented, at least as far as I can tell.
Yeah, most Linuxes I find are bad.
Is busy. I am notorious for missing emails, and I always feel really horrible about it, because I want to definitely answer everyone, whoever emails me. But I miss things. Things happen. But I try a lot of times I try and reach out to other researchers to get more information about something I'm stuck on. And, sometimes, people are great. I've had, good fortune with some people that have really helped me, move forward with, my understanding. Like Corlin Coder, who wrote the foreword of my book, he helped me a lot with my exploit development. I feel like I really moved my understanding of exploit development forward working with him. I have some people I can go to with pen testing questions. I mean, I feel like a lot of what people get, particularly new people, before they're, in any way established is, they might get on IRC or they might get on, a chat board or something, ask a question that is perhaps, we might consider, a question you should have Googled, and then they get a response like, get off noob or something like that. And I think that can be really, we can lose people who could be an asset to this community because they give up. It certainly can be. Even at this point, when people do that to me, when I ask a question and, just get ignored or get laughed at, that can be really annoying, and it can kind of make me want to throw my hands up in the air and say, oh, fine, I'll just go be an artist or something. But yeah. I think at this point, security's got me, so.
Yeah. Well, I think in the, when I took, me and Mr. Betcher took the Sec 542 class, a lot of what you're doing at the very beginning is having to do research where you don't have necessarily that open-ended, okay, I give up, I'm going to ask this question. So you have to kind of hone that ability to search first. I think you would lose a little bit by having somebody being able to give you the answers all the time. I think a lot of, it used to be you'd have to go to a card catalog and go, okay, birds, I'm looking for a specific bird or whatever. And, then if you give up, you just ask the librarian and they'll give you the book. But,
well, Georgia, you mentioned that in your book. If you don't fully understand something, go out and find some background information on it.
That's true.
You actually point that out.
Right. And I give some references at the very end of the book. There are references for, places to go next. The book got bigger as I worked on it. And, I wish, there's parts of it where it's like, I wish, particularly with like post-exploitation, I wish we could have done more post-exploitation. Like, I wish there was a PowerShell chapter. I wish there was more web application stuff. I wish there was more mobile stuff. But I guess at some point, the book would have been as tall as I am, and it's at some point, the reader's gonna have to make a decision of, what they want to do next. My only hope can be that, I've inspired them to continue with this. I've given them, the fundamentals, but at some point the reader, I guess, is just going to have to, make a decision about, what they want to study next, what they want to dive into, because probably just about every chapter in the book there is, if not a whole book written on the subject, then, lots of resources online. And like you say, with research, I kind of fell into research, just kind of fooling around with my phone, and realized I kind of had something that was, at least to me, sort of interesting. When I first started doing research, it wasn't really with research in mind. That was, I guess, is another really kind of silly story about, a lot of people have the problem of text messaging perhaps when they should not.
Mr. Betcher got kicked off. He'll be back on in a second. So
okay.
So you were mentioning that, yeah, and you're right. Every part of your book could be a whole book by itself. Social engineering part, the PowerShell stuff, and a lot of that when you started writing this wasn't necessarily. I don't think PowerShell was in the fore as it is now. You've got Carlos Dark Operator. You got doing all kinds of stuff with PowerShell. You've got Dave Kennedy with the social engineering stuff. You've got I mean, each one of these little chapters could have almost been a book all by itself. So, I think what you're wanting is, like you said, when I started working on it, I wanted the step zero. I wanted a book to tell me, pretty much how to get in the door.
Right.
I think.
That's absolutely what I wanted, or my goal was in writing it, that it's, people who have, basically I wanted to write it for myself when I first started CTCDC, that it's like I had basically no knowledge. I mean, theoretically, I knew how to, compared to, most people, I was the person you came to get your computer fixed. But now, okay. I mean, comparatively, I didn't really have any knowledge of I had heard of a buffer overflow. I'd never written one before, kind of thing. I mean, it was, the academic problem in general. I mean, the reason why, I guess it's the community colleges that were always winning, at least in my region, the cyber defense competitions, is because they got more hands-on, and we, in the academic sphere, the more, universities, we spend a lot of time, talking about the theoretical stuff.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really have that much hands-on experience, and I just felt like, I took OSCP, the Offensive Security course.
Okay.
And it was, even at that point, by that point I had a bit more experience, but, if I had tried to take that course, while I was in college, it just would have been, I wouldn't have known how to do anything.
Yeah.
So it really, and it's it's the kind of book that people ask me what I do. I feel like people in general, particularly young people, are just becoming more technologically savvy. I mean, you see 3-year-olds who are better with the iPad than I am. I feel like people who have, some knowledge of, how to use a computer, they don't necessarily have to have a computer science background at all, could pick up this book. I mean, really all you have to be able to do is follow instructions in chapter 1 to do the setup, and I mean, other than that, I mean, it walks you through it, it explains it. So I think the goal was to take someone who didn't necessarily have any experience and make it such that they had some. I mean, certainly I don't think anyone's going to read this book and then suddenly magically be, a great and wonderful pen tester. Unfortunately, the only thing that can do that is experience, but I mean, it can hopefully, get people interested in doing research and moving the field forward and learning more, and hopefully get them through the door. I mean, through my classes that I've done, I mean, the happiest moments of my life probably are when people write me and say that, based on taking your class, I now got a security job and now I get to do what I love. And, that makes me really happy. So, I hope my book can do the same thing on a wider scale, just because it's available to more people. I mean, you can hopefully buy the book anywhere.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And you're all about, helping people, which is what we're about as well. What's your next talk on?
My next talk, I'm not sure. I have not been doing that much research because of the book, and been doing a lot of teaching as well, but research is really one of those things that's on the top of the list right now. I kind of want to mix it up a little bit and maybe do something that's completely not mobile at all, but I've also got a couple ideas of things that are in the mobile sphere that I want to look at as well. I mean, the only black hat, well, I guess not the only black hat, but I've done Black Hat Abu Dhabi. So I've done Black Hat Middle East, and I've done Black Hat EU, and now this year I'm teaching at Black Hat USA. I've done Arsenal to show SPF, but I've never actually done main stage Black Hat USA. So I want to do something that is the kind of research that they're interested in. I mean, you see the kind of talks that they accept, that I guess I kind of want to do something along those lines. It's another checkbox for me. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with Black Hat, but it's one of those ones that, I definitely want to be able to say that I have spoken on the main stage there. So
yeah, it's like playing for the Yankees or for Barcelona or something like that. I mean, it's top flight, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I'd gone through, I've gone through about chapter 7 of the book, but one of the things I liked about the book was you didn't have an over reliance on tools. You didn't go, okay, yeah, we're setting up your environment. Here's Metasploit. We're going to do that. You do have a chapter for that, but for like ping sweeps and stuff, you had a nice bash script in there that showed you how to set up a ping sweep if you didn't have, say, Nmap or something like that, which I thought was quite powerful because when you're on an engagement and you get access to a box inside the network, or you often won't have those tools available to you. So it's good to have that scripting knowledge when you're going to, work on the inside. Did you find you learned the bash scripting first, or did you learn with like the Metasploit and the Nmap first, and then learned how to do it with the scripting?
Well, I kind of learned it more with the tools first. I mean, I would still, if I really got down to it, will probably, always consider myself a, script kiddie, as they call it, to some extent. Just, with the, I mean, no matter how far I go, because there is such a reliance on the tools. But I did want just to give, some programming knowledge as well, because I feel like that's another thing that's often assumed, is that you already know how to script. And I can remember like the first time I played Red Team at Collegiate Cyber Defense competition, it was like you got points if you scored, your flag, and it would have been quite simple for me to, write a script to just have it check in every 5 minutes. I mean, this would be a very simple script, you just basically netcat to the score bot. But I didn't. I would just continue to exploit it over and over and over again, which was, my reliance on the tool. It's like, oh, Georgia's so good because she can do MSO 8067, which is just, it's like people were so impressed by it. But it was like I was at that point very much hewn in by the tool that, I did want to make sure that and at least covered to some extent, the ability that pretty much anything that the tools can do, you could also do yourself. And I mean, that's how we end up, and again, how I end with, I wrote this tool. Now maybe you can write a tool now that you've gone through this book. Now, maybe something in this book has caught your fancy. You can do some more research in it and write a tool of your own, and, thank me in your acknowledgments kind of thing.
Do you find that people who call themselves quote unquote penetration testers are too reliant on tools instead of, finding out what's under the hood and, finding out how that Metasploit module works instead of just point and click and shoot?
I think it's a two-sided problem, really. I mean, on many of the engagements I go on, they want it done fast. They want it, they don't really, I hate to say this, but a lot of customers really just don't care. They just want to check a box. When you get a customer that really does care about, their security posture, about, fixing things, about, building such that, we don't come back a year later and yes, they've patched everything we said, but their patch management system is still broken. They changed all the passwords that were default at the time, but there's still everything that they've put in place since. But people who actually want to be more secure, I mean, those are the great customers. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think, a lot of it, unfortunately, is built around that model that, people just want you to come in, do your pin test, and if you could see me, like doing, air quotes, and get out. And I think that, just the training that a lot of people get as penetration testers, I mean, there's places that do very good penetration testing. I mean, I do work with, as partnerships and subcontracting with a variety of places. And, there are places that do, a really good job and with training their people, above and beyond necessarily what is required. I mean, a lot of, unfortunately, penetration testing, again, in air quotes, work is really just run a Nessus scan and verify it. They don't really want you to go any further. They don't really want to know what their real risk exposure is.
Sure.
So, I mean, I can understand like why train people to be better than that if that's all they have to do anyways, which was, where I found myself, at the beginning of my career. It's like, all we have to do is run Nessus and basically have people say they're not going to fix it anyways.
Yeah.
So, why send this person? Why is it fiscally responsible for us to send this person to get an offensive security cert? Let's get her a CISSP because that's what the government at the time required. And, that was, how things go. Whereas I wanted the OSCP, and actually my mom bought it for me for my birthday.
Nice.
Bought me the OSCP. I do see, a lot of reliance on the tools. I mean, I'm responsible for kind of the same thing. I mean, if you wanted to know like the deep underpinnings of Metasploit, I'd probably have to spend some time looking at the code to figure it out. It is, kind of a reliance on, it's been a long time since I've been on a pen test where I, actually wrote, the exploit code from scratch myself. I mean, usually you just don't have time. Often, there's already a Metasploit module for it anyways. So.
Sure. No, I get that. I mean, you got the tool, but it's like well, I hate to turn every analogy into driving a car, but you're driving a high-end Tesla Roadster. You don't care how it runs. You just want the key to turn, which for as long as you understand what's under the hood, that's fine. But I'm finding myself where I'm like, okay, I know it works, but I want to know how it works. That kind of thing.
Right. I feel like that's really the point that I've gotten to, that it's not necessarily going to be good for business in the short term, but I really do want to take more time to really, get back, to the beginning, just kind of, sit there with the, the old frac magazines from, the very beginning, go even farther than that, like, back to the zeros and ones of early computing. I feel like, that background that, I guess because I am so young, because I came into hacking and computing even so late, comparatively, I feel like I missed some of that stuff. And I feel like, my research, my understanding would certainly benefit immensely from that time taken. And it's like, yes, I'm able to do these things. And yes, I can, learn more about HTML5 and SOAP and this and that and the other. But I feel like also going back to the beginning, the earliest, things that we've supposedly fixed, that are no longer an issue, like when they were first discovered, how they were first discovered, kind of things. I'm, as an exploit developer, for instance, because I'm teaching exploit dev at Black Hat and really getting into exploit dev myself. That's like, one of the ways I want to go. I want to win. You heard it here first. I want to win Pwn to Own someday. I'm very reliant, and I wasn't, because, I used to just do it, like my earliest exploit dev classes, it was, I did Ollie debug just because I didn't know that Mona.py existed, I guess. But it's like, now I'm very reliant on Mona.py to, tell me what I need to know. I was like, oh, I can just make Mona tell me, which, it certainly makes my life easier. But it's, again, a reliance on a tool, and it's like just thinking back that it's like, oh, this seems so easy. That's generally, the first thing my students say is that, after we do our first, simple, stack-based buffer overflow, save return pointer override, they're like, wow, this is so easy, because, we start out, with no data execution prevention, or, ASLR or anything. Start out with the very, very basics. And it's like, wow, this is so easy. Why wasn't everyone doing this? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
Mona.py didn't exist. I mean, they didn't even really have the cyclic pattern yet. It was, I mean, back in the day, there wasn't even really a debugger. So it's like, kind of going back to that time and, understanding how people found it without any of the tools, I think, will be, I mean, that's one of the things I want to do.
So Mona.py is it's a debugger for, is it like IDA or you mentioned Ollie debug. So does it do 64-bit and 32-bit or?
Well, Mona.py is actually just a plugin. It runs on Immunity Debugger or WinDebug. It's just a plugin helper for exploit development. It was it's developed by the Corlin team. I wrote a patch for it, so I'm technically a Mona contributor. But yeah, it's named after Peter's daughter. It's just a tool to make your life much easier. It is used in the book. So
okay.
You're interested in that. If that's unfamiliar to you, but you're interested in exploit development, it is used in the Windows chapters of exploit development in the book. So I think that's what 17, 18, and 19.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. Cool. So you, what made you start working on mobile hacking? Was it the new frontier, or did you just thought it was easy to do, or just came naturally to you, that kind of thing?
It was completely unplanned. Even that, I guess, I worked in security, and they had started a group in Northern Virginia called Nova Hackers, which still goes on to this day. Really great group. And it's like, I went to ShmooCon, I went to DEF CON. It's like, I guess it never really clicked for me that it's like, oh, I could be that person on the stage presenting. But obviously now I do it a lot, or have done it a lot. And once I actually get some new research done, because I hate to just do the same thing over and over, so I really want to wow people with the next thing that I come out with. But no, it really wasn't planned in any way that I was even going to, when I started just messing around with it, it wasn't even that I was going to give a talk. It was actually another silly story. Because I'm sure many of us, especially when we are young, and I was about 21 or maybe 22 at the time, I think it actually was at DEF CON that I sent a couple of text messages that I, in the sober light of day, probably should not have sent. And so I had this idea that it's like, why don't I just write an app to stop myself from drunk texting? The stereotypical, you have to solve a math problem kind of thing. But unfortunately, I have a math background, so I can probably answer the math questions no matter what. But then it was like, well, I can just turn off the app. So then I was like, well, what if I did something at baseband layer? So this was in the day, it was the G1, that was the Android, and kind of dating how long ago this was. So not that long ago, but it was and it was so cool that you could run Debian on it. You could run full-blown Linux on there, so you could dual boot it, and that was so exciting. But it was it's really hard to type on that tiny little screen. So it was if I'm drunk enough that I shouldn't be texting, it would probably be harder for me to unload a kernel driver or something. So that's so I decided to look at doing it at baseband level. I found prior research that people had done on basically trying to find exploits for text messaging. So they were basically fuzzing the baseband. So that was some code I could use as a base. So it was GPL code that was kind of along the lines of the beginnings of what I wanted to do. So it's that hooked it up to the baseband. So I was so if I can stop myself from sending messages, I could also, along the same vein, stop messages from coming in, make it'll be seen by the baseband before it goes to the application layer. So I could, do some processing on it there I mean, that's basically what became my SMS botnet, which was the first research I did. ShmooCon put out their CFP, and ShmooCon has always been, as far as I can tell, very big on giving new speakers a chance to speak, which is really cool for a conference of that caliber. I mean, typically, you have to go through like the whole, newbie track at B-sides and whatnot, or maybe stable talks at DerbyCon. But no, ShmooCon put me on the main stage.
Cool.
And so I definitely owe them a lot, that they took that chance on me. That it was kind of a lark thing. That it's like, I wonder, if I hadn't gotten it at ShmooCon, if I even would have, submitted it anywhere else, because it wasn't really. I didn't feel like I was really on this track to go be, a security researcher, because again, it was just kind of me fooling around, and it just so happened to turn into a security research project that I found that I really enjoyed doing security research, so I thus have continued.